Good afternoon, Texas Apartment Association friends. We're here with the Education Foundation series, Hints from HR. You can catch us every month on the second Wednesday at 12:15 live or now at your leisure on our podcast. And you could find that wherever you find your podcasts. I'm Blaise Spitaleri with Gemstar Construction. I'm here with the VP of the TAAEF, Becca Ramadi. Hello, Becca.
Hi.
And before we're going to jump into our topic, we have a very special guest today. It's the National Director of Sales for Spruce, Mr. Jeff Duerstock. Jeff, if you don't mind, do us the honors, introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about your tenure in multifamily.
You bet. Becca, Blaise, thanks so much. I'm coming live from Washington, D.C. We are wrapping up our Operation and Technology Conference for NMHC today, but I really appreciate the invite and joining both of you to talk a little bit about the Hints from HR session. But Jeff Duerstock, based in Dallas, and really happy to be here.
Well, thanks. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how long you've been in multifamily and what you've been doing?
Sure, we can. So I'm approaching 15 years. Believe it or not, it's went by really, really fast. And I've always been on the supplier side of our industry. Made a lot of great connections, a lot of great relationships. I'm currently with a company called Spruce. We're based out of Austin. We're focused on lifestyle services. So we deliver housekeeping, pet care, and laundry in about 16 markets across the country. And yeah, been heavily involved in the associations, lots of volunteer opportunities, chaired various committees, but live and breathe multifamily.
And before we jump into this, thanks, Jeff, for being here. Just a quick fun note. One of the first times I went on the TAAEF was a conversation with you about 2 years ago for the Be the Next Room to Grow Ambassador.
Yes. I think we did that over in Arlington, right?
We did, and it was almost like 2 years ago to the date. So glad to have you back on and have a conversation with you.
Yeah,
so in September, our HR crew on this series talked to Stephanie Grant from Olympus Properties, kind of just talking about when a person joins a new industry and how what they were calling the Great Resignation was creating all these opportunities for individuals to check out the multifamily realm, but also generating new talent that may be parting ways with their previous fields of employment. So today, there's been a little bit of a shift in some language, and they're going from the Great Resignation to the Great Attrition, or the Great Opportunity. Nicole Block actually kind of initiated this whole segment, and we miss you today, Nicole, and we hope to have you back on. She had a previous engagement that deterred her from jumping on with us, but we have Jeff that's going to hold it down for us, and Becca as well. And we're going to talk about all these great opportunities that are coming forward in light of the Great Attrition. So let's start day one, right? We're at a new job. We've all been new at some point. What are some things that new employees need to remember or think about from the starting point?
Yeah, being new can feel awkward almost, right? Like, there's levels of uncertainty there, whether it could be a brand new product that you're not familiar with. It could be a brand new industry in some cases, right? Like I think back to my first day in multifamily. I mean, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. But, I think first and foremost, you got to remind yourself you've been selected for this role, right? Like, there's that level of confidence that can create that foundation for you. You've been put here for a reason. So when you start to feel that uneasiness, I think really thinking back to, like, you've been selected. Like, they see either a various skill set, or they see opportunity with you as an individual, and that really should help keep you grounded, or build a solid foundation for what you're about to learn or move forward with.
That's such a great point. I mean, you were chosen from who knows how many people to fulfill this role. They want you there, and you should have that confidence going in. Doesn't mean arrogance. It means there's lots to learn, but the confidence that they want you there, that's huge.
Yeah. And Becca, to your point, I mean, every company has different hiring practices, but in most cases I see, there's panel interviews, or you're meeting with multiple layers of the organization, even maybe probably different departments. But it's a good point that it's obviously there's probably one hiring decision in terms of the individual you may report to, but most people are taking feedback from multiple levels or pieces of the organization to make that decision.
Now, Jeff, speaking of that, is there anything, maybe on a personal note that you've learned when you've been new to a job that you could share? Maybe some insights, some stories, maybe something on the onboarding process?
Yeah. Well, first I'll say, it's always been part of my nature to ask a lot of questions, right? Like, speak with curiosity. Don't just assume. Definitely like that is an expectation that you should come into with, definitely be curious and ask a lot of questions into that process. When I got started into the energy business, I had done office supplies for, I think about 7 years before that. And, your knowledge base of that type of product starts to grow because, you're living and breathing that. Going into the energy space, I had no idea what I was doing. And I still learned as the, years went by, because, our industry has so many variables and things start to evolve. And at the end of the day, you start to get looked at as a subject matter expert, which is, it's important because our industry, especially on the supplier side, like we're looked to as, a guide in terms of like they need our feedback or our help with, how should we approach this opportunity. And so, but I circled that back to like, it's really important to always be curious and ask questions. Don't assume that as almost a mechanism of like, you're not confident. It's more of a aspect of making sure that there's understanding.
I think also to piggyback on that too, don't be afraid of saying you don't know sometimes, right? Because you don't know what you don't know. And we're all always learning and evolving and going through the motions. I have to say multiple times, sometimes in the construction realm, when I switched careers, something similar, like I don't know all of that yet. I am still learning, but I can get you answers, and I can definitely give you the right people to help facilitate your requests.
Blaze, you actually just reminded me of something that made me chuckle because, and I'm going to share this here because I've shared it only with a few people, but I grew up in the utility space, and it's not the most modern business, right? But when I moved over to prop technology, I was a little bit of a fish out of water. And I had to use Google Docs for the first time. And I literally called someone because I had no idea how to save the document. Like I was so used to file, save. And they were like, no, Jeff, it saves itself. And I'm like, I don't trust you. Like I've spent an hour on this thing. And they're like, no, look in the top left-hand corner. So to your point, don't be afraid to ask questions because I was so worried I was going to lose that document, but you're always learning. You're always learning.
Yeah, and our industries and our technologies are always changing and evolving. And, don't be afraid of failure as well, because that just creates more opportunity to learn and seek all those opportunities as well. Jeff, at one point, and you haven't mentioned it yet, but I did want to talk a little bit about creating a brand and the relevancy of creating a brand and what that means. You want to touch on that?
Yeah, your personal brand is so important, right? Like, from obviously you have a product that you're representing, but it's really you, and when you go into an organization, I always say both internally and externally, you're starting to build that brand in terms of when you walk into meetings, it's important to be collaborative. It's important to, make sure like that you are working well with others. And from an external perspective, like that brand starts to evolve, right? Like, especially, in multifamily as an industry, we've always talked, or I always share with folks that, at all levels in this industry that, we are passionate, and it's not just about here. I'm, here to solve a problem or, be a service for you. It's almost like, we are understanding our industry as experts. And, I've been in Capitol Hill, we've talked about ADA compliance, and, from a brand perspective, that starts to evolve at all levels of leadership, but it really becomes important to who you are, and people start to recognize, like, we trust Jeff, or we trust Becca, or we trust Blaze, like from an aspect of, it's just really important to keep that brand, in your mind as you approach, whether it's, like I said, internally or externally.
Well, and it happens over time, right? It's
Mhm.
something that you can grow and will change and evolve. And what a great time to start thinking about that as in a new position. When you're new to an organization, you almost get to reinvent yourself, if you like, or add on to what you've been doing.
Mhm. And that's how you continuously grow. And I love that you touch base on the passion that we put into it, because I think the most success is really the satisfaction of delivering the customer service from a supplier standpoint, right?
Sure.
You want to be the problem solver. You want to help out as much as you can, because we see the value in it. And I think it's definitely shows, your humanity levels and your people, your love for people in general.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
think that's what drives this industry.
Yeah, and you understand the business, right? Like I've never been on the operator side, but I have an understanding of, what they're dealing with, and it obviously has continued to evolve. It's always evolving, right? But, I think that's where we talked about earlier, asking questions. For us to be able to be a really good support system, no matter what your service you're providing, we really have to understand their needs, their goals, ask those questions, and understand the business.
Well,
And
and on-site folks have to do that for their residents. So it's all very much related.
it all comes full circle. And you just segued great into the next part of this conversation. So the employers, what do they need to be thinking about on day one when they have a new talent coming into the organization?
Well, first of all, it's really important to be flexible, right? Like, when you go to, when you're entering that with a new employee, it's really important to kind of sit back and make sure that you have an understanding of, like I always say, like, tell a story. There's a beginning, middle, and end. So don't just come in and say, okay, here is your access. Here's, a little bit about what you're doing. Like, tell the story of the company. Like, where did it start? What is the background? Like, who are the players in terms of who sits in what seat? Because that really helps, in my opinion, like create like the strong foundation in terms of like how it all works before it's like, here's how you're going to contribute to this.
Would you say, like, have a flow chart of your organization and like who you can go to? Because there's a lot of times you get into a new organization and you have no idea who to go to for what questions. And, when something pops up, I think it's be very detailed and, on point with how you're going to be successful.
Yeah, I love to whiteboard with new employees. Like, we go into a room, the whole board is white, and then we just start having a conversation, but creating a visual aspect to, like you just said, whether you draw out the org chart or whether your company has an online org chart, whatever the case is. But at the end of the day, have that conversation about it. So that way they're more engaged in, how the process works, and what kind of the flow is. Just like when we're on the supplier side, it's really important for us to understand who the stakeholders are, not because we're like, okay, we're going to skip all of these steps and just get to the decision maker. It's really important to kind of, like you said, be detailed and kind of understand which aspects are important along the way, because then it's just going to create a more sticky relationship in the future. So
absolutely. A nice whiteboard in the background, Becca. That was just a good observation that we could throw the whiteboard in there. So I know with the, we've talked about the pandemic and what that did for a lot of like work-life balance, and it caused a lot of this great resignation, but then we have a great opportunity now, and we're trying to figure out a way for the employers and the employees and the future of both to find that middle ground. What could we do to address work-life balance in your eyes?
Work-life balance is always tough, right? Like, because everyone approaches it differently. But I think as far as like making sure that everyone feels empowered and making sure that everyone feels like, it's a team, like we're in this together, I think that goes a long way in terms of making sure that people feel like it is balanced, because at times, like right now, I mean, I say this back half of the year is a complete marathon. We cannot run fast enough. We are cramming 18 months of programming into 6, and we're all really excited to be back at it, but my gosh, are we tired? And so when you say work-life balance, like, there is, at times, if it doesn't feel like work, then there's really balance there. But, from an aspect of just making sure that people feel empowered, if they need a break, let them take a break. But at the same time, they want to enjoy what they're doing. And that's really where the best balance is created.
I think you're foreshadowing our next topic, the great burnout. And no, I joke because the passion for it, right? We love what we're doing, but it has been, I concur. It's been a little tiring, but it's going to get better as it always does, and we're going to find all the value out of that.
I think what's so interesting about this switch from great resignation to great opportunity is that it puts it in the employer's hands to really understand and ask the questions of their current employees that they hope to keep, what they need, and gives them, hopefully gives them the information to then make appropriate and changes that make sense to their business, to be able to do a better job of keeping those folks. And really, you can't address what you don't understand. So ask the questions and be willing to hear the answers, I think, is what's coming from this shift, or hopefully.
We've talked so much on this program too about company culture and what that all means. And I think, being part of something, feeling valued, I think that those are very important traits. And not to kind of get off topic, but recently I discovered a Reddit thread called Anti-Work. And I read it just because of some of the insane things that management, this is obviously not our industry, it's just people in general, but what managers feel like they can do to their employees. And it's sad sometimes when you see how people are treated and how unfairly, some organizations work. I don't believe that's anybody in our industry, and that's why I think our industry is amazing. And I think people, if you're looking to get into it, this is the time to do it as well.
Yeah.
Now, going back to some of these questions now, it's not just about the economics of everything too, but that matters. But you really want to make sure that we're offering competitive wages. And yet everybody's getting the most value out of their employment and their employees as well. Anything that you want to touch base on as far as like wages and how that weighs into making decisions on new opportunities?
I mean, I will say, money does matter, right? Like, people are motivated by money. However, I will almost say like the larger, I guess, combination is beyond money, right? Like, it is culture. And I appreciate what Becca just mentioned earlier around, like, you have to be willing to hear those answers. So, we often want to ask the questions because it's the right thing to do. But then if we're not listening, like, then nothing gets done and gets better. And, I think, some folks, like I said, money is a motivator, but at the end of the day, like, if we really enjoy what we're doing and we're there for a purpose and we feel like we're valued, like, that's where we spend so much time working. It's not just about the paycheck. It's about feeling fulfilled. And, all of those other components are equally important.
And it's going back to that work-life balance too. It's balancing, a lot of people are realizing it's really difficult to spend most of your days in traffic, commuting, and, missing, if you have families and children or whatever the case may be, but missing all of these events that sometimes we get caught up in the just working to the bone. I feel like that's the American way, right? That's how we were all raised, was, at least in my eyes, was you work, and that's the number one priority. But I think now we're all collectively realizing that we need to find that balance, and that's the only way that we're truly going to be successful and move forward in the right direction. We touched.
There was a really good list that I saw that came from this McKinsey report that on the great attrition and great resignation that I think was really interesting, just because it offered sort of a roadmap for what employers may consider sort of those top things to think about. And they were, we talked about a lot of these already, but listen to your employees, focus on the relationships, the belonging to something and the value there, making employees feel valued as a whole person, ensuring that leaders have the skills to lead and that leaders are being taken care of as well, especially after these last almost 2 years. We talked about culture, career paths and development. We've talked about that, and building a sense of community and that it takes energy to keep that up and keep that going, but reminding people that we are a we as a company or a community or an industry. But so I think those are really great things for people to think about and make sure that their companies are focusing on those. And I'm really pleased that we have so many episodes of Hints from HR that cover those items. But, lots to think of and lots to open your eyes and ears to, I guess.
I think this is a special episode too, because not often do we have a supplier partner on as our guest as well. So I want to take the time because we always talk about, we talk about both sides, obviously, but we talk a lot about the operating side and a lot of the career paths that are available. But Jeff, I want to kind of ask you, if anybody is in the audience or listening to this and they're interested in a career in multifamily, do you want to tell us about some of the many opportunities in the supplier partner companies that what kind of goods that they provide, what kind of services to the apartment communities?
Yeah, sure. No, I've been fortunate to be a part of this industry for a while, and I never knew I'd build a career here, right? And first and foremost, for folks that may be new to our industry, I want to share, there is lots of opportunities in our business. I've hired a number of people over the years, and I share with them that, the multifamily real estate business, not only are we fun, first and foremost, but two, we're somewhat of a commodity. Everybody needs a roof over their head. And, our industry's done a really good job of making renting attractive. And, from that aspect, we talked about feeling valued and return on our investment, to be a part of an industry that is growing by leaps and bounds, especially in Texas. It creates a lot of opportunity for folks to, either get started in the industry, become a leader in the industry. And so when you ask Blaze about different opportunities, a lot of people think of suppliers as just sales folks, right? We're all in here to get deals done. And that's not the case. We have full scaled operations where, there are companies that specify just in multifamily, but they need marketing people, they need operation people, they need training people. There is all kinds of roles and opportunities to support these large organizations that are supporting such a large industry.
Totally. And actually, just with the way our technology works and changes in our apartment communities, there's so many opportunities for brand new entities and commodities, if you will, to come into our space that maybe, we just never thought of. We see that all the time. Go ahead. I read an article recently that some apartment communities, and I'm pretty sure it was Nashville, are starting to build media stations inside their apartment communities as amenities, little recording studios, because it's such a heavily, music influenced city that they feel like that's going to attract more people to their communities. So, worldwide, but at least nationwide, it's going to also depend on, what market you're in, what's the culture like in that market. And there's a tremendous amount of opportunities for new organizations to come in as well and be able to provide services for the residents.
Yeah, we are a pretty broad industry in terms of, people living in these homes really are, it's a dynamic business, and it takes a lot of different solutions to make that work. And some solutions are created through opportunities like, the package industry now, like we look at how many companies have, created different types of solutions, because it's not a one size fits all. There's various ways to approach packages, and, look at the companies that have kind of got their heads together and came up with different solutions to solve that opportunity. But to your point, Blaze, like it will not stop, meaning new opportunities will be created, new solutions will be needed. Being here, gives me a real, reality of the number of services and solutions that are out there for our industry. I mean, there's probably 800 different types of companies here. And I also love that there's like this innovation center where there was, roughly 12 new companies. I mean, these are companies that are maybe less than 2 years old that are, trying to get the word out about their new operation, their new solution. And so, I love that our industry embraces that type of innovation, and taking it kind of back to from a supplier perspective, there is all kinds of opportunities from every type of role you would think, from even HR to marketing to operations to sales. I mean, it's a robust industry.
So the long and the short of it is, if you're interested in coming onto the supplier side, reach out to Jeff. I think he would be a tremendous asset to guide you in the right direction.
Well,
and myself or Becca.
You can also visit roomtogrowtx.org and learn about jobs in all facets of the multifamily industry.
Absolutely. And I wanted to touch base, Becca, you mentioned that McKinsey and Company study. I believe, are you going to post that maybe in the comment field or somewhere?
Sure.
Is that a webinar, Becca?
Yeah, I attended a webinar that's probably still up there, but I'll get the webinar information and the article as well.
Yeah, I think that would be very useful for anybody that wants to look into that further. I don't know, Becca, do you have anything that you would like to add?
No, I will tease out that longtime listeners will know that we are gearing up to do another edition of Be the Next Room to Grow Ambassador. Last year we focused on maintenance professionals only. This year we're going to focus on individuals who've been in the industry for less than 5 years, or 5 years and less. So that covers suppliers and maintenance and leasing and everybody, as long as you're newer to the industry. Submissions for that challenge will be starting in January, and we'll post lots more about what to do and how to do it, and coming in the next month or so.
I love that.
So
yeah, that's definitely super exciting. So look forward to that. Totally. Becca, it's always been a pleasure. Jeff, thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoy your time in DC. Happy 2-year anniversary of the last time we spoke virtually, at least.
Right. I need to get to Houston soon.
Yeah, no, we'll need to get together again soon, in person.
For sure. Well, I really appreciate the time and the opportunity here. I always love chatting with the two of you, and most importantly about our industry. So thank you.
Thanks, Al.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
a lot. We'll catch you all next time on Hints from HR. Thanks, Becca. Nicole, we need to get you back on.